Well, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you to Spokane Public Library for hosting us. It's always good to partner with them. I'm Tara Hill Matthews. I'm from Aging and Long-Term Care of Eastern Washington. I'm the Dementia Resource Catalyst there, and our goal is to keep people at home for as long as possible as they age. Today we're going to be talking about the warning signs of dementia. And here's our plan for today. We're going to go through how to define both dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and there's a clue in there that those are two different things that we'll talk about later. We'll go through the 10 warning signs of dementia, so the very first things to look for if you're worried about getting dementia. We'll talk about what to do if you're worried someone you know has dementia, so how to start that conversation, what to do. We'll talk about the process of diagnosis, so what it looks like when you actually go to the doctor. And then at the end of the PowerPoint, there are a lot of resources that you can turn to if someone has questions, and there are also resources on the table there for anyone who wants them, which you can also get through Aging and Long-Term Care. I will share the PowerPoint after this, and as we go through this, if there's something on a slide that you want to know more about, there's this symbol, the book symbol, that you can just click on and get the resource for that. All right, so we're going to start out with dementia basics. What dementia is, who it affects, that kind of thing. And here's the big reason that this is important. First of all, a lot of people are afraid to get a diagnosis because they worry that they'll lose their independence. But ironically, getting a diagnosis actually lets you be independent for longer because you connect with resources and you can start exploring ways to minimize it. There are a lot of barriers to diagnosis. There's a lot of stigma around dementia. So a lot of times when I do this, I ask people what the first thing they think about when they hear the word dementia is. And a lot of times people come up with things like confusion and memory loss and living in a facility. A lot of people's minds go straight to the end of dementia. But there are a lot of steps in between getting a diagnosis and a long-term care facility. And actually, this surprises a lot of people. Most people who have dementia do not end up in a long-term care facility. So I'm going to say that one more time. Most people living with dementia do not end up in a long-term care facility. Also, a lot of people just don't know the signs of dementia. So I know that a lot of people think of memory loss when they hear the word dementia, but there are other things too that can be warning signs, and we're going to go through those in the next section. Also, post-COVID isolation. Some people don't have someone to let them know that there are changes that they might be experiencing. And it can be hard, especially in our area in Eastern Washington, it can be hard to find a provider to diagnose dementia as well. All right. I start all of these sessions with a quote from people living with dementia. And so I'm going to read this. "We have learned to live with our memory loss and still have productive lives with family and friends. We would like to give you hope that you too can live a full life. There will be obstacles to come, but you have an opportunity to give back to your community and yourself and to experience beauty, happiness, and kindness." And that was written by, you can see the names there, that was written by a group of people living with dementia. So I just want to emphasize that it's possible to live a full life and have dementia at the same time. Just like it's possible to live with any disease, cancer, any disability, and have a full life. As we go through this presentation, there are a couple of words that I want to define. The first one is person or people living with dementia. And we use the acronym PLWD for that. That's just someone who's been diagnosed with dementia or might have dementia. Care partner is someone who is helping someone living with dementia, usually day to day. Sometimes they're living with them. not always. Caregiver is another word, but care partner is usually a little bit friendlier. Alzheimer's disease is, spoiler alert, we're going to get into this more, a type of dementia that affects memory, thinking, and behavior. So Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. And then younger onset dementia is dementia that begins before age 65. Here are some words that we are not going to use. The first are demented and dementing illness. So those are both not too friendly. The next two are the ones that I get the most questions about. So affliction and then victim or sufferer. That just kind of takes the person living with dementia, it kind of takes their autonomy away. So we're not talking about them as a victim, but someone who experiences dementia or someone who's living with dementia. Also, senile is one that I hear a lot. And slang expressions like not all there or losing their marbles or something like that is pretty rude. And then the last one is the burden of caring. And I don't want to minimize care partners' experiences with caring for someone living with dementia, but there are a lot of positive things that people get out of it as well. And there are multiple studies that show that. So if you have any questions about any of those words, you can go again to this little book link right here and find the resource for that. Here are 4 different definitions of dementia. One is not better than the other. These are all from respectable sources. I want you to take a minute to think about what these definitions have in common or what you notice about these definitions. So one thing that's similar to all of these is that they all include memory loss, right? But they all also include other things. So things like problems with language or communication, mood changes, personality changes, the ability to make decisions, problem solving, those are all also part of dementia. Another important thing to note is that these are things that interfere with daily life. The question that I get asked probably more than any other question is, I'm having trouble with X, whether it's remembering people's names or losing things around the house. Do I have dementia? And while I can't answer those questions usually because there are a lot of things that go into a diagnosis, that's when it becomes a problem. That's when you want to see a doctor, is when it starts interfering with your daily activities, with your daily life. All right, I want you to step into left field with me just for a second. We're going to talk about skin disorders. So let's say that you woke up with a rash on your arm and you go to the doctor to see what's going on. And the doctor just says, well, you have a skin disorder. But they don't tell you the specific skin disorder that you have. You'd probably be a little upset, right? Because you're expecting to get something like eczema or hives or something like that. It's the same thing with dementia. So dementia is not a specific disease. Dementia is a category of diseases or an umbrella term for diseases of the brain. Alzheimer's is by far the most common in the general population. So about 60 to 80% of people with dementia have Alzheimer's disease. But it can also be vascular dementia or frontotemporal dementia, or you can have more than one dementia even. And for some populations, actually, another one is most common. So for example, frontotemporal dementia is most common in people who are younger than 65. Just want to reiterate, dementia is not another word for Alzheimer's. 2 different things. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. Also, it's not a death sentence, and it's not a normal part of aging. I hear that really, really frequently. My dad is just getting older, so his memory isn't what it used to be. Dementia, so memory loss that affects daily life, is not a normal part of aging. It's also not a mental health diagnosis. And I know that that is kind of a common misconception because it does affect your mental health, or it can affect your mental health, but it's a medical disorder of the brain that changes your brain chemistry. All right, so we've talked about what dementia is and what Alzheimer's disease is. Now we're going to get into some statistics for our area. Right now, currently in America, almost 7 million Americans live with dementia. And that number is expected to almost double by 2050. Also, dementia kills more people than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined in America. And it's the third leading cause of death in Washington State and the fourth leading cause of death in Spokane County. And then kind of related to that, there are 11 million Americans who are unpaid caregivers for people living with dementia, and about 200,000 of those live in Washington State. So a lot of those statistics were national. Now we're going to focus into Washington State here. So you can see that in the first chart here in 2020, about 7% of the total population were 80 or older. By 2040, we're expecting 12% of the population to be 80 or over. So that's good news, right? In a lot of ways, that means that we're living longer, which is great. But it also means that as we age, we're more likely to get dementia. You can see that people who are 85 years and older have a 33% chance of having dementia, whereas people who are 65 to 69 years old have a 3% chance. So age is the biggest risk factor for dementia, but again, it's not a normal part of aging. So this slide kind of squashes the two slides we just looked at together. You can see that the number of people living with dementia in 2020 is about 50,000 people, and then by 2040, it's expected to be almost triple that, about 150,000 in the over 80 category. So I'm not showing you this to scare you or to say that dementia is a normal part of aging, just to show you that as we age more and as we get older, as we start living longer, we'll be dealing with dementia more. Then we're going to get into the warning signs. The first one is not going to surprise you. Are you ready? Oh, before we go over the warning signs, I just want you to know that these should not be used as a diagnosis. If you're worried about any of the warning signs, even just one of them, then I would recommend going to a doctor so you can get a screening for dementia. Also, a lot of these warning signs can be symptoms of other diseases or other, it can be a vitamin B12 deficiency or maybe an infection, something like that. So it's always good to go to the doctor for these, even if it's not dementia. Could be something solvable. All right, now the first one is not going to surprise you. The first sign of dementia is memory loss that disrupts daily life. And remember, the last half of that is the important part, the disrupts daily life part. So it is pretty normal as we age to have changes in our memories, but when it starts disrupting daily life, that's when it could be a concern. So this can look like a lot of things. This can look like needing Post-it notes to remember things. Maybe you have Post-it notes on your fridge to remember dates and appointments and are using more of those. Maybe it means forgetting a child's birthday or your spouse's birthday. Maybe it is asking the same question over and over again. But it's really normal to, for example, meet someone and then 2 weeks later forget their name. Like that's normal for everyone. And I want to reiterate that memory loss that interferes with your daily life is not a normal part of aging. The second sign of dementia is challenges in planning or solving problems. And what that could look like is not being able to count change when you go to the store, or maybe the total at the cash register is $23, but you hand them a $5 bill. So something like that would be an example of this. It can also look like difficulty concentrating. So maybe it's tougher to concentrate on reading a book, or maybe you've been a baker your whole life and you're finding it hard to double a recipe. So all of those things could be challenges in solving problems. The third one is difficulty completing familiar tasks. So this is things that you've done over and over and over again, things that you could do in your sleep, basically. So the first sign for a lot of people is not being able to drive home or not remembering how to drive home. Maybe you play pinochle every Friday and you forget the rules of pinochle. But it is normal. It is a normal change to sometimes need help with something like setting the microwave or recording a TV show, setting your clock when the time change happens. Another sign is confusion with time or place. So people who might be starting to experience dementia can lose track of dates or seasons. So this could look like not really understanding if someone tells you that a birthday party is happening in 2 weeks. So thinking about the future can be difficult. It can also look like forgetting where you are or how you got there. But it's totally normal to wake up thinking it's Thursday, but it's actually Wednesday, something like that. Totally normal. This is one that surprises a lot of people. One sign of dementia is trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. So often this looks like tripping more often, or having trouble like maybe putting a cup down on the table, but you missed the table. So having trouble gauging distance. But of course, it's totally normal to need reading glasses or to have cataracts. Some of those physical eye changes are totally normal signs of aging. Number 6 is new problems with words, so communication issues. And this could look like, one of the things I hear most often is, I know we think a lot about not being able to remember words, and that could be a sign, but one of the most common I hear is stopping in the middle of a conversation and not really knowing how to continue. So most of the time, it's normal to like lose your train of thought or to not really know where to go next in a conversation. But when you can't retrace your steps and go back to where you were and then keep having the conversation, that is often a sign. But it is totally normal to have trouble finding the right word sometimes. This is another one where the second half is the most important. So the next one is misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace your steps. Because what's the first thing you do when you lose your car keys or your glasses? First thing you do is, where's the last place I had it? And then try to retrace your steps to where it might be. People living with dementia often find it really difficult to retrace their steps. That's one reason that they frequently accuse others of stealing, because if you think about it, if you can't remember where you had it last, or you're certain that you had it someplace and you actually didn't, then the logical conclusion is that someone must have stolen it. But of course, we all lose things from time to time. We all sometimes lose our car keys and have that panic moment where we need to find them. Number 8 is decreased or poor judgment. So this could be giving more money than usual to telemarketers or people who come to your door. I know I was talking with someone else in a different class recently about this, and they said that one of the first signs for them is their mom had a brick house, and when they went to visit her, there was metal siding on the brick house. So she had been scammed into putting metal siding on her brick house. This could also look like smaller things too. So it may not be money related. It might be wearing shorts in the winter or not paying as much attention to grooming. Maybe not remembering to shower, something like that. But it is normal for all of us to make a bad decision every once in a while, like not remembering to change the oil in the car. Another sign is withdrawal from work or social activities. And there are a couple of reasons for this. So part of it is memory issues. So like we were talking about the games, maybe they forget the rules to a game and don't want to be involved anymore. It can also be difficult for someone living with dementia to pay attention to a conversation. So that could be part of it. And also some people who are starting to experience these changes don't want other people to notice the changes in them, so they avoid social activities for that reason as well. But it's normal for all of us to sometimes feel uninterested in family or social engagements. Totally normal to want to cancel something every once in a while. Maybe pretend you're sick, I don't know. And then the last one is changes in mood and personality. So it is a normal age-related change to develop specific ways of doing things as we age and to be annoyed when those are disrupted. But people living with dementia kind of run the spectrum in terms of personality changes. So on the one hand, they may become more withdrawn or apathetic, or on the other hand, they may be more anxious or fearful or confused. Just really anything that's out of the ordinary could be a sign of dementia. I just want to reiterate one more time that these should not be used as a diagnosis. And for every single one of them, you're looking for changes in a person's behavior. So, like, I am terrible at directions. I don't know if I could find my way home right now without a map, to be honest with you. But my dad is great at directions. Like, he always has a map in his head. So if I get lost, I would maybe not be that concerned about it. But if my dad got lost, that would be a little bit more concerning. So that's what I mean by changes. You're just looking for things that are not normal. So in the next section, we're going to be talking about changes. It can be really difficult to start a conversation with someone who you think might be showing these signs of dementia. And there are a few reasons for that, right? We don't want to embarrass the person. We don't want to make them feel like we don't want to draw attention to something that might embarrass them. Also, it's hard to know how they'll react, right? It's hard to know what their emotion will be. So these are just a few tips for starting the conversation. And we're going to go through these a little bit faster. So the first question I would ask is, are you the person who should be having the conversation with them? Would another person maybe make them feel more calm? Do they know another person a little bit better? Would it be better coming from another family member or friend? The one thing that I would have you remember from this section, if you don't remember anything else, is that it should be collaborative. Because we talked about at the very beginning that one of the biggest reasons people don't get an early diagnosis is because they're afraid of losing independence, right? If you come in with listen, we need to go to the doctor right now. I made an appointment for you. We're going today. That's going to reinforce the idea that they're going to lose independence. So asking questions is a great way to start. Something like, I've noticed that you're not reading as much as you used to, and I'm a little worried about that. Have you noticed that? So a question like that. Also a question like, how have you been feeling lately? Or I noticed this, and is there anything else that's happened like that? So those are some options. Really just asking questions, trying to determine how they're feeling about the situation. Also, it's okay if it doesn't all happen in one conversation. You don't have to say everything that you're thinking or everything that you're worried about in one conversation. Sometimes it's best to just give a little piece at a time and have a few conversations. Also, I put all these resources at the end of the PowerPoint, so we're not going to go through all of them, but there are resources to help you have this conversation. There are a lot of benefits to early detection, and I'm not going to read every single one of these, but they're kind of in 4 different categories. The first is medical benefits. So there are a lot of medical benefits to getting an early diagnosis. First of all, there are more treatment options if you get an early diagnosis. Some of the medications for Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, they work better the earlier you start them. You can also participate in more clinical trials if you get an early diagnosis. And there are also things that have been proven to often, I don't want to promise anything, often reduce the symptoms of dementia, like exercising and eating healthy. So you can start incorporating some of those into your life. Also, like I said earlier, some things mimic dementia. So it may just be hypothyroidism or an infection or a vitamin deficiency that's easily resolved. There are also emotional and social benefits to getting an early diagnosis. So part of that is being able to decide what you want to happen during the disease, what you want to happen at the end of your life, but also things like legal decisions, so appointing a power of attorney, things like that. The third thing is financial benefits. So I know a lot of people are worried about spending a lot of money on doctors if they get a diagnosis, but actually if you get an early diagnosis, you usually save money because you're able to stay at home longer and you're able to be independent for longer. So here are kind of those in a shorter list. We already talked about all of them. All right, last thing we're going to talk about is the process of diagnosis. And the reason that we're talking about this is just so that you know, especially if you're starting the conversation with someone, you know what to tell them in terms of how the process will go when you go to the doctor. A lot of people have negative feelings about going to the doctor, and there are a lot of reasons for that for a lot of different people. But in this case, like we've said, it's good to have an early diagnosis. All right, so here's step number 1. Are you ready? Step number 1 is to always ask for a cognitive assessment as part of your Medicare annual wellness visit. And I'm going to say something bold, which is that I would recommend getting that done even if you do not have any symptoms of dementia. The reason for that is that you want to establish a baseline, right? You want to know where you are when your brain is healthy so that you can see changes as time goes by. The bad news is that not all providers will do a cognitive assessment as part of the Medicare annual wellness visit. So here are some things that you could say if they're not doing a cognitive assessment. You could say that you want to establish a baseline. You could say you've noticed some cognitive changes and you're worried about dementia. So how can we check for that? So things like that. So the cognitive assessment, some of you may have experienced that already. So it's drawing the clock, remembering words and then repeating them later, drawing from A to 1 to B to 2 to C to 3. All of those things could be part of a cognitive assessment. It's usually just verbal. Usually a doctor or nurse will just deliver it right there in the office. If the doctor is worried about anything on the cognitive assessment, they might make a referral, usually to a neurologist or a neuropsychologist, so usually someone like that. And they might do a variety of things. So they'll probably review your medical history. You want to bring your list of medications with you and any documentation that you've noticed. One thing that I usually tell people is that if you're starting to see changes in someone, you want to start documenting all those changes. So document when they can't find their keys on Monday, and document when they were irritable on Tuesday afternoon, things like that. Any changes that might be happening. They also might do a neurological exam. So they might look for signs of other neurological conditions like strokes or brain tumors, things like that. They also might test your reflexes or coordination or eye movement. So the follow my finger situation could be part of that. And they might order some brain imaging. So it could be an MRI or a CT scan, something like that. They also might do more cognitive testing, so they might do a longer cognitive assessment, maybe a MOCA or a computerized exam, something like that. And they also might complete a depression screen or mood assessment. That surprises some people, but the reason for that is that depression can also mimic dementia. So some of those warning signs that we talked about earlier can be signs of depression. All right, here are some questions that I would recommend asking. And again, I'm not going to read all those to you, but some ideas of questions that you can ask. And there are also some questions that the provider might ask. So it helps, especially if you're nervous about going to the doctor or you're nervous about what they'll say. I'd recommend preparing a little bit, just thinking about what you want to know, making questions ahead of time, and also being prepared to answer some of these questions too. So like I said, documenting, bringing a list of your medications, often bringing someone with you who lives with you can be helpful, or who interacts with you a lot can be helpful. The last thing I want to show you is just a video. This is someone who's living with dementia.
I was diagnosed in 2010. I was a public defender, and I was on my way home, and I came to a four-way stop near my house, and all of a sudden I didn't know whether to turn right or turn left or go straight. And at that moment I knew I had Alzheimer's. I haven't changed very much. I'm still who I was, and I believe that because I live alone, that's what's kept me in the early stage. I could have continued working, but I just didn't know how many good years I had in front of me. I have a daughter who is an accountant. She will be taking over my finances. At this time, I can still balance my checkbook. Yay! But at some point, she has the power of attorney to take over my finances. With regard to when I can no longer take care of myself, a year ago I went to look at assisted living facilities. I guess I'm not really ready for assisted living because I can still do everything. There are things that people who have dementia that they can do, and that is being socially active, eating a Mediterranean diet, exercising, taking memory meds as directed. I was diagnosed 7 years ago, and I'm still doing great.
So the last few slides, like I said, are just some resources that you can use. The first ones are mostly local resources, so kind of what to do locally. Then we have some specifically around stigma and early detection. There are some specifically for starting the conversation, and then there are quite a few from the Alzheimer's Association as well. So the biggest thing I want you to remember from this is that if you are diagnosed early with dementia, you'll be able to retain your independence for longer. Not only that, but you're not alone in either helping someone with a diagnosis or getting a diagnosis yourself. There are so many resources, both online and locally, that can help you through getting a diagnosis, but also working with a diagnosis and living with a diagnosis. Getting a diagnosis of dementia does not mean that your life is over. There are plenty of people who are living full, productive lives, even with a diagnosis of dementia.
Hi everybody, I'm Sharma Shields. I'm the Writing Education Specialist for Spokane Public Library. We have a lot of exciting events for adults, teens, and kids in our community. You can find these events on our website or follow us on social media. We look forward to seeing you at the library soon.